Tragedy strikes Buffalo, and we are here to talk about it with you. Diamond Diehards is on. Joe Rizzo here, bringing you baseball and football today, along with the dog, Jeff Healy. It's a somber note that we start the show with. Dog and I, like everyone, is just gripped and ripped by the tragedy that struck on a football field. You know, usually we're a baseball podcast, but I think we've been sort of pushing some of those limits here, the past few months and kind of transitioning to where we could do a little more of this type content for you. We're back on Facebook now. So on January 4th at 7:36 Eastern time, if you're checking us out on Facebook, we're glad to have you with us. But Damar Hamlin, was a name that very few of us had heard, about 48 hours ago at the time we're doing this show. And, now, as one of the New York tabloids put it, he's America's son, dog. I mean, this is it, sometimes it's a sporting event, sometimes it's something else that just brings people together. And at this point, if you haven't seen or heard about it, I don't think we're going to shed any new insight onto exactly what happened there. We're going to wait and see a little bit more as the days go on here. All of us will learn more because it's a story that everyone's paying attention to, because a lot of us see ourselves, our family member, our friends in Damar Hamlin. Just a damn good kid who we didn't know a heck of a lot about, that was playing in a professional football game for our entertainment. And dog, I mean, he died on the field, and because people were there, they brought him back to life. I mean, in front of our eyes, essentially. A miracle of modern medicine, coordination, preparation, whatever it is. It's just an unbelievable story here to start 2023, dog, as we keep our eyes on Damar Hamlin's condition.
Yeah, really, really good shout out to the first responders who were on the ball with that 100%. They were ready to execute. They have, in the Army, we call them battle drills. I'm sure they call it some other sort of drill for immediate response on the field. And it shows how serious it's like. A lot of times, you sort of see the ambulance there, maybe a doctor hanging around somewhere, a couple of EMTs, whatever, at your high school football game and stuff like that. And you don't realize, I mean, that 30 seconds could be it. And this is a real evidence of that. If had that been old school, he just went in the ambulance, that might have been a different situation, right? They were there, they were monitoring right away, and were able to take immediate action. I think the NFL medical officer or one of the doctors at the hospital went and said, basically, if they hadn't used the defibrillator, he wouldn't have made it. And that's, even that, like a newer piece of technology that now you're starting to see be more commonplace around the workplaces and so forth, and at different facilities and whatnot. Most cop cars now will have them as well, rather than just the ambulances and so forth. And just amazing piece of technology that can provide literally the spark of life.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly that's precisely what happened. I mean, it sparked his life. At the time we're doing this, he's still in a struggle for his life, and on this fourth day of January in 2023, we did get some at least some encouraging news about his improvement. But we typically are not ones to do shows that are so much based in current news. We're a little more evergreen. So if you're running into this show at some time in the future, it would still kind of make sense to you. But I think there was a lot to learn from that. And we'll do the baseball stuff later on with Rafael Devers signing back with the Red Sox for 11 years, and the Carlos Correa thing still up in the air with the Mets or whoever, but probably the Mets. there's so many questions, some of them were answered for us, dog, but it created so many more questions. Like I can't watch that. And I was watching it. To get very personal. My son, Dominic, who actually created the jingles for this show, the one that you heard at the beginning and the one that you'll hear on the end electronically. He and I were having a little life discussion that was, pretty important stuff, father son stuff. And he was on the wrong end of the lecture. Let's just say that politely.
That was implied.
Yeah.
now it's avert.
And dog, I'm out of the corner of my eye, I see the play on the game, and I see, T. Higgins catches the ball. It's just a crossing route. You've seen it a million times, right? And he turns forward and he leans into Hamlin. Hamlin makes a good solid tackle. He took the hit in the middle, and he parried Higgins like the way, a boxer, somebody throws a punch and it lands, but you parry it by controlling your body. And he did that, and he turned, and he used the momentum of T. Higgins against T. Higgins to drive him to the ground, and he landed on top of him. He bounced up and was adjusting his face mask, and then all of a sudden he just fell backwards. And in the middle of my conversation with Dominic, I said, "Oh my God, this guy just passed out right on the field." And Dominic said, "Well, are you more interested in this conversation or what's happening on a football field somewhere, Dad?" And so that kind of, he wasn't wrong about it, because it was a serious conversation that we were having. We were discussing serious stuff. And I said, I'm interested in our conversation, but I'm shocked by what happened. I've never seen that before. And then he went outside and he was, doing something in the garage, and he came back in, and, a little while later. And I explained to him what was going on. I said, I apologize for losing my attention. I said, but this young man is literally fighting for his life in the field. And I've been watching sports for a long time, and I literally I've never seen this. I can't, and I'm in disbelief. And I'm just praying that this kid is going to make it, who I'd never even heard of before that. And now, of course, his name is on the tip of everyone's tongue and at the top of everyone's prayer list. And the story about his GoFundMe is it's the silver lining of a very black cloud, dog. And he's in support in his area in Pittsburgh, where he grew up in. I think it's in Western Pennsylvania, and he went to University of Pittsburgh, and he had a GoFundMe whose goal was $2,500 to help buy toys for kids that couldn't afford them. And I think it's over 6 million now. It might be over 7 million.
Yeah, I think 6.5 was the last I saw.
Yeah.
So pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's is it why are people doing that? They're doing it because when you see something like that, it's selfish, dog. It's actually selfish, I think. The first thing you think of is, oh my God, what if that was me? What if that was my son? What if that was my nephew? What if that was my friend? And you put yourself immediately in their shoes, and you want to do something to feel like you can help and be part of the cause. There were, from what I've gathered in the reports, there were 29 people that were on the field that were kind of responsible for the medical response that saved his life. And we hope it's a long lasting one here. But you and I have talked a little bit offline with some of our crew here about, like what are we always doing, right? Like we're looking to improve upon any of these type situations, right? Like the response, see, to me, the response was they saved his life. I'm kind of good with everything else. Like the 66 minutes postponement after the time that he collapsed. Like there's a lot of people that were, I mean, Twitter was on fire with how the hell is this game not being canceled right now? And like honestly, I didn't care. Like I was like, well, anybody who kind of is watching knows that they're really not going to play again. So I like, but there were a lot of people, and to their credit, I'm going to say to their credit, because I think you're one of them, that said the response, it could have been better. And when we say that, we mean everything that was around the way the event was handled. But we definitely agree that the medical and the first responder response was flawless,
Yeah,
because they
absolutely.
had to be. They
Yeah,
had to be.
yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I kind of thought about it a little bit, and it's sort of surprising just because the NFL is they're so prepared and they're so professional, right? They simply don't screw up stuff like this. And the medical was a great example, right? That's something they've rehearsed. They have a solid plan in for any sort of major injury or whatnot happening to the player, and they went out and executed as best you possibly could, right? So that's sort of like the standard. That's what sort of made it kind of like the public relations and the communications portion of it was where I had the issue, particularly at the commissioner level. Like my issue was above the field, so that this is not a decision for the two coaches and the refs and stuff like that. They clearly would have input, but like it's a commissioner level decision to kind of have it. That's like his job, right? That's his primary job, is sort of things like this. You need to have an oh bleep. What do we do, right? And you have advisors and procedures in place to handle these sorts of situations. Terrorist event. I mean, you can run down the whole list of gamut of different things on there. Every major organization like that should have a list of what do we do in this situation. And there's a couple people who are responsible for. I mean, the security guys. I mean, the NFL has a giant organization like that. I mean, they're almost akin to the DoD, right? In terms of like preparation and planning and so forth. Like you have to be a very well-stocked organization to have people like that to do that sort of planning and contingency planning for the once in 100,000 games that something like this would happen, right? So that, again, that's to me was sort of why it was shocking. Had it been some of the other professional sports, frankly, it would have been less shocking. It would still be disappointing to me, but it'd be less shocking because the NFL, I always kind of assume, is going to do the right thing. So our basis on that was kind of debating back and forth, and I think the NFL was exposing themselves to be put in a very bad light. Like when they suspended, like once the kid went away, was on the defibrillator, like we were talking before about like the soccer player who like recovered on the field and waved and stuff like that. Like that's a different situation, right? Now that you might have had a different answer to what you wanted to do going forward with that, but once he went in, they shocked him. They know he's on the way. They know he's been hit with the defibrillator. Sure, to context at the hospital. They have the inside info, right? They know he's getting intubated. Like once that's on, the night's over, right? That's it. Once the guy's getting intubing, he's not going to make a fast recovery. He's going to be, he's in critical condition, and it's not going to be not critical for the next 12 hours plus whatever.
3 days minimum.
Yeah, right. So I mean,
And the best
saying,
case, right,
yeah,
scenario, it's 3 days.
So it's so it's done, right? It is done at that point. And that's where the commissioner has to come in and say, best interest of the sport, best interest of all the players and so forth. That's his level of responsibility to kind of go in and say, this is what's happening, and we will figure out tomorrow. Like you don't necessarily have to say this is the full plan. You just gotta say, look, this is a horrific incident. All our thoughts and prayers are with the player and this and that. And that's all we're focused on right now. And we'll let everybody know all the permutations starting tomorrow as soon as we have them. Thank you.
Well,
That's it. It's a 30-second conversation, a 30-second tweet out from NFL.com or commission himself or whatever else. And instead, I think they really expose themselves to potentially bad outcomes. I mean, the kid could have died on the way to the hospital. You want to sit there and say you're suspending the game, you're going to cancel it, or you're not going to resume that night at least, right? Just say it. Like otherwise, it looks like you're chasing the event. And it's I wouldn't say it wasn't done with like bad intent. Like there was some people who were kind of reading to that. I wouldn't go there. Right? I don't think that was it. I just think they were not as professional handling it as it could have been, and it could have had a really, really bad outcome. And fortunately, it didn't. Right? And again, we argued that was it 30 minutes? Was it an hour? Within an hour, it was sort of wrapped up, right? So, and
Yeah.
they didn't say we're going to play the game and all of a sudden change their mind, right? That would have been horrific, right? So they were slow and delayed in the response, and I think they made them look bad where they didn't necessarily have to be. And the grand scheme, a couple days later, yeah, we'll talk about this, for another day or two. But now it's more about the toy drive and the recovery of the player and so forth, and the more positive side.
Right, but down the line, you need to have lessons learned. Like that's how you
Mhm.
get better. That's basically what this country is built on. Like you got to always try to improve whatever's there, even if you feel like the response was, if you feel like the response was good or not so good. I mean, I'm sure there's people that were in and around it that felt they could have done this better or that better. It's hard to nitpick. You got to trust that these people understand their jobs. But I think that what you kind of said is that the NFL doesn't have like this, it seemed like in this case, they just didn't have like a, I guess what you call like sort of a doomsday plan, right? Like, and if, something like this happens, I mean, I think things like this probably happen in the stands, right? And, that's event management and,
Mhm.
that type of personnel, which could be, some of that personnel could be similar to the personnel that are handling the field. They could be in multiple roles. I did talk to our pal, Mike Saffo, who's an NYPD detective, and he explained that in any event that he's covered, there's a 30-minute tactical meeting before the event, but it's not ever the same group of people that are there at an event covering it. Now, one thing I thought was important and why I didn't care that they weren't making an announcement that the game was suspended was because the longer you keep the people in the stands, the less people that are going to be going to their cars and getting on the road and potentially blocking the young man's ambulance from getting to the hospital in a timely manner. I think it also gave people a chance to gather themselves in the stands because, I mean, listen, it's most traumatic for the young man. And then, the layer of his family that was right there. Unfortunately, but thankfully, I guess, is a way to look at it. His teammates and his friends, and then after that, his opponents, and then the crowd and everybody watching on TV. So there's layers to it. But as someone who was 600 miles from Cincinnati, I was shaken up. I mean, I was shaken up from seeing it. There was another report that had come out, and it's, I guess you can call it a report because the television announcers were saying that the players would be given 5 minutes to warm up, and then the game potentially would resume. But Zach Taylor, the Bengals coach, in his first press conference, which is earlier here on Wednesday, he explained that word really hadn't gotten to anybody on the field. So just because that was reported up through ESPN and Joe Buck and Troy Aikman in the booth, that doesn't necessarily mean that the same message was emanated on the field. Now, Dog, that brings up something that I thought was your biggest point in our offline discussion, was that you felt that it didn't seem like it was easy to identify that there was somebody like in charge, right?
Yeah, yeah. There was no immediate person who seemed to jump out, and that's why you got conflicting information on that. Like for example, on that ESPN, and they reported, and they're standing by their story on it. They said, they spoke to team and league officials, and I think a potentially referee. If not, then apologize. you know, and again, I could have been talking to one of the refs on there, right? Like, so, and that's why I sort of separate out, like, there's sort of like the tactical level and the strategic level, right? So, like, the tactical level, like, the ref might have been just saying, look, after the game starts, we'll give him a little bit of time to warm up and then we'll go back, right? He may have had no, that it may just be a stat, pending, a pat answer, like, lightning stoppage or whatever else like that. That's the sort of SOP that we'll have a little time to make sure our players don't injure themselves, right? So that might have been the intent of what that guy was saying. He wasn't saying like, as soon as we get the body out of the way, we'll start playing 5 minutes later, right? That's sort of what people who had an axe to grind were kind of driving with it. And that, honestly, I don't think that was fair, right? Again, we're not privy to the conversation, but I would give a little bit of benefit of the doubt to the person who was trying to say it. I'm going to say was trying to do the right thing. And again, that's a thing again that, they're deep down in the woods, or I'm sorry, they're deep down the weeds on it, trying to deal with a situation literally happening right from and all that. Like that's where you have the league who's separated and has the 10 lawyers and the crisis manager, like, his security council around him, who would sit there and say, hey, let's just take a breath, right? This first report, let's see on this. What do we absolutely need to do? Well, we need to look out for the player. We need to look out for the fans and the elder players and the teams and so forth. And, and frankly, the reputation of the league. And what's the right thing to do here, right? And then make that sort of decision at that level. And that's where it's kind of appropriate. So I did see the thing on the ESPN one. Again, I think that might have been someone takes, 1 and 2 and gets 6, right? And it wasn't like they were trying to mislead people or anything, but maybe people were kind of reading into it what they wanted to versus what necessarily was the facts on the ground.
So somebody had sent a tweet during that period that, especially tense first hour, that said, could you imagine one of your colleagues being, lying down and getting CPR and then being taken off in an ambulance, and then your boss comes in and says, okay, you got 5 minutes to warm up and you're back to work.
I gotta say, and I don't mean to chuckle on it, like coming from like my Wall Street background, like pre 9/11, yeah, I could have seen that actually. That's
well,
and which
Doug,
is maybe more of a statement on finance than anything
Doug,
else.
I'm gonna tell you a story. I'm gonna
And
tell you a story.
go ahead.
So when I was at Sports Ticker, during an evening shift, I was a writer, like a newsroom writer at that point, basically, and writer and editor. And I was working. No, I don't know. I just don't think, was I working overnight? I don't think I was working overnights. I might have been working overnights at that point. And late in the evening, during the middle of like a busy, NBA, NHL type night, while all the games are going on, my friend and colleague, a man by the name of Humphrey Stokes, and all my Sports Ticker brethren that are watching it are doing the same thing that I'm doing right now, because you never met a greater guy in your life. He simply fell off his chair and he went into cardiac arrest. And one person in the newsroom was not very well trained in CPR, but at least he had some, and he was trying to do what he could. Mm-hmm. This was in Jersey City. It took a while for the ambulance to get up there. And they took him away, and it wasn't the outcome that we wanted. Like he passed, within the hour or whatever it was. And so you could imagine how shaken up you are. It's your guy. like it's your friend
Yeah.
and it's your coworker. And, you know, most of the newsroom pretty much cleared out, and I just kind of sat in my chair and I did the Sonics Sacramento Kings recap. You know, I just kind of had to, I mean, I don't know what I had to do. I mean, if I didn't do it, I don't think anybody would have fired me or anything, but you know, I saw that tweet and I said, I mean, it's not what I wanted to do. Like, I didn't
You
know
thought that's what
really,
you're supposed to, yeah.
I just didn't know what else to do. And
Yeah.
then my good friend still to this day, Brian Davis, who was best friends with Humphrey, you know, hours and hours and hours later, I could still see his face. He walked back into the newsroom, he turned the corner, and I knew that that our friend was gone.
No,
So,
awful.
you know, when I saw something like that, I mean, that's the first thing that I think, you know, it's a personal experience. You know, it's something that I will take with me forever.
Yeah.
You know, it's a night that you know, I couldn't tell you all the details and everything, but you know, I sure as heck remember how I felt. And
You know, and I think our society's gotten a little better, right? The fact that, you know, that we would have done that because that's what we sort of felt you're supposed to do, right? Just like keep driving on, keep doing what you're doing stuff. And you know, I think we've, you know, maybe matured a little bit as a society, and we sort of realized that, look, you know, people are suffering and there are bigger issues than the immediacy of continuing a shift at work.
well, I think that we all,
And maybe, you know, 30 years ago, that your action would not have been shocking, right? Whereas today, maybe that would have been shocking. And I said in finance in the 90s, right? But I'm sure people have keeled over it, and I'm sure nobody stopped trading around that time. And you know, was that right or wrong? I mean, that's the way it was back then, and I think it's different nowadays, and we're probably better off for it.
yeah, you know, I think that what happens is why it's important that we all have different roles in you know, societal situations is, you know, people, it's fine. Like some people react differently. Like I mean, it was a hell of a thing to go through, but you know, in that situation, I mean, I guess I felt like I was composed. And you know, I didn't mind that others weren't. You know, I was there to you know, comfort them and do whatever needed to be done. And you know, there's some of us that, you know, maybe in those situations we react that way, and in other situation I don't, you know, I probably wouldn't react that way. I don't want to find out, to be honest with you. But on that particular night, um, you know, I had a little bit of composure, and you know, maybe I felt a little that some of those around me needed to see a little bit of strength. And I think you saw that on the field in Cincinnati. You saw some of the Bills players that were having, you know, just an impossible time in the moment. And then you saw other ones that were more composed and came over, put an arm around somebody. And, you know, it's again,
And everybody deals with it differently, right? So,
yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think, when you see that as well, in such a public, you know, these guys are gladiators, right? They're warriors, and now you're watching them cry on the field. They're grown men sobbing on the field because of what's happening 12 feet away from them, right? It's sobering. You know, it rips the scab off, and when you see it as even a fan, if it doesn't, that's the reason why he's got $6 million plus in his GoFundMe, because this is a personal story for somebody, you know, driven by somebody who almost none of us actually know or have ever met or barely heard of. It's personal, because for the story that I had, there's a million other people who have similar stories, you know, and the details are, different, and that's not important. It's just, it's in there with some, I mean, listen, you've served in the Army, like, you have a look at the 30,000-foot view of how everything went down that I respect, even if I want to question stuff or I don't necessarily agree with everything that you said or thought about. I think you told me to F off about something about, I don't know. Probably, yeah. Resident dogs don't always agree on everything,
That's, it's funny. I was actually going to comment on when you're talking about like sort of driving on and stuff, and that's obviously that's something that's part of Army training and first responder training. Like SAFA would be the same sort of situation, and obviously that's a different situation, right? Because there's a risk. Like inaction has a risk of harming other people as well. Like something like if SAFO's partner gets shot, like they have to continue driving on to try and capture the guy who did the shooting, right? If someone gets hit in an IED, you've got to drive on and get him out so you can get him back to back to treatment, and nobody else gets injured as well along the way. So I mean that is a little different, and I was kind of didn't want to sort of mention that because again that's sort of a different situation than something that's a discrete event of one person having a medical issue at work and going down. It's funny, well I shouldn't say funny, but perhaps illuminating. Like a lot of people talk about they'll do like everyday carry of weapons and stuff like that, and like being prepared and stuff like that. And remember Tim Kennedy, who you've obviously talked to before and stuff, and like he had a great one on there, like and he's all for everyday carry and all that. It's like what, the first thing everyone should carry is like a first aid kit. Like if you want to really go out and be a hero for somebody, carry a first aid kit, right? Because your chances of using the first aid kit to help someone is far higher than all the other sort of crazy stuff you carry around and stuff. And you can bring the other stuff too, and maybe you'll help save a life someday with that or not. But just having a tourniquet, having band-aids, having basic stuff around, and having a little bit of awareness of what to do with the stuff, and how to call 911 and what to tell them and so forth. That's the sort of example. Like that's what anybody could do. Like we were just I was just talking about like defibrillator, like for the scouts, like we go out, we're like an hour away from an ambulance, right? I mean, we're hell and gone away. If someone like falls down, I'm like, we got to shock and we got to do CPR, and like that's it. Like we'll call for the ambulance, but we're the first and second and third responder. Like by the time the ambulance gets to us, I mean, it's a long time there. So you need to go out and you need to be prepared for anything that happens in that sort of situation. And maybe this, maybe a great thing like the toy drive would be kind of cool, but you know what? Everyone else go out and learn how to do CPR and use the AED. Learn where the AED is in your office. Where the hell that is. 'Cause I tell you, if he keeled over, he's got a shot in a minute or two, but you can't take 5 minutes to figure out where the hell the AED is. Right? You gotta know it's by the coffee machine and send someone to go get the AED while you're doing CPR. Right? And knowing that sort of immediate reaction, and talk to everyone in the office about it. Right? And that may save 10 lives down the road someday, because one person told the other 100 people who'd like to know they're the right thing, but just haven't been told what to do.
Or just having the awareness to always see where one might be. You're walking in a mall or you're at a restaurant or whatever.
Yeah, like the fireman counting the steps to the door and stuff, right? That's their training. That's a whole different level of preparation and so forth. But again, it's just sort of an example of things you do to be prepared, so that you have you're ready to react when something happens. Famous quote from Dwight Eisenhower, like no plan that survives enemy contact. It's like, I never had much use for plans, but planning was indispensable, right? Learning all different stuff and what needs to be done, that's indispensable, not the necessarily the outcome right away.
Yeah, we took this
Dwight
one,
Eisenhower, veteran of the day.
Yeah, I don't know. Are we still doing that? I don't know. Yeah, well, we kind of did Die Hard Dads too, right? Like,
yeah.
Or is Tim Kennedy veteran of the day?
No,
they could share. They could share.
Yeah, exactly.
One was president, one will be, maybe.
God willing.
How about this kid? Maybe Damar Hamlin someday becomes president if I'm kind of like I'm counting the hours, and these benchmarks, when unfortunately you've been through uh
Yeah.
health issues with people. It's like your first benchmark was, of course, like on the field, right? Like that was the number one. But then after that, it's like 48 hours, right? Like how have you done in the first 48 hours? And then once they do, we're right about at that time. And then, they're constantly like reassessing, right? They're reassessing condition. But now, when I hear and feel that we get to 48 hours, now let's see what the next 72 hours are gonna bring.
Yeah.
And that's what his family is going through now. I think, I don't know if at this point he's even awake yet, but hopefully that's the next bit of good news that we could hope for. And then dog, there's been some of the now that, so this happens on a Monday night, on Tuesday everybody's sort of catching their breath and just even getting an understanding of what happened, right? Because not everybody was watching. And then, by Wednesday, everybody starts talking about like the football part of it, and it, you see there's a lot of support for playing the game and how are they going to do it or whatever. But, it kind of strikes me that like when is in the 2023 world here that we're in, like it was horrendous when Skip Bayless was tweeting about it, like, within an hour of this thing happening. But now it's Wednesday, so it's okay. Like I like I like is it okay? Like, I mean, is there even an answer to that? Like you and I were talking before, you're like, yeah, there's no way that they're gonna make up that game. And if you listen to Mad Dog Unleashed earlier in the day, you would be convinced completely the opposite. You say there's no way that they are letting that game go without being played. So I don't think anybody really knows.
Yeah.
And I think in this day and age, it's like we're pushing and we want answers. And if somebody's making the wrong decision or an ill-advised one, it's like they're going to just get slammed. And it seems like there's just a lot less patience and understanding for saying, hey, we're going to let this thing play out. And like, if it doesn't play out exactly the way one person likes it or another person, they're going to sit there and bash heads about it. The bottom line always is still this kid. And like,
And the players involved, right?
yeah,
I mean that's they've had a traumatic experience themselves. Everyone in that organization. And it's tough. I mean, you feel for the Bills right now. I mean, how'd you like to be Sean McDermott right now, right? I mean, right now he's got a game this weekend against a hated rival. He knows he's got another game that maybe he's got to play, maybe he doesn't. Will this affect how he's got to position and use players and so forth for this weekend's game and so forth? It's tough. It's it's a lot of tough decisions to be made. And and that's the thing. You really want to go and sort of lay out the different scenarios. Like we were sort of talking on the game, and like if you had them replay this week, right? Like do you kick everything back a week? Like do you just play who knows, right? I mean, are you going to play it Saturday? Are you going to play it Sunday? I realistically, I don't see how they would, given the fact you have the playoffs stacked up and everything else stacked up. Like even if you say like I kicked the playoffs back a week and we'll just take away the bye week for between the championships and the Super Bowl, which is sort of I guess sort of the next way if you're going to do that. Who knows, right? Damar could take a turn Friday night, Saturday. It could you could have a even more tragic situation on Saturday.
yeah.
And you're gonna tell those guys to go play a game? And the guy is all of a sudden gets a prognosis that's not as hopeful. You're kind of uh, to me, you sort of, I don't know. I don't see how that's a viable course. It's a course of action, but to me, it's not the preferred course of action. And you say, what, this was an act of God. Yeah, this came down, boom, this happened. Move along. That's it. This game is wiped out. Whatever the standings were, whatever the seedings were, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they tied. Whatever the hell you want to put on there, and that's where you come in as the commissioner. Like that's where you say, like, all the BS stops. Just move along with this. Like we have our procedure. It'll be this. This is how the playoff rankings will go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We would love to have had the game. Some things are more important, and some things just happen, right? And that's just the way it is. And you move along. And then to me, that's sort of the clearer, the clearer situation versus
Listen,
versus trying to work this thing in. And like I said, you're not in control of that situation. Like that's the other problem, right? God has a vote in this one with the kid, right? And the NFL could do all the planning they want. I'm like, you want to sit there and then say, and have them all wearing black, for in mourning, and then tell them they have to go out and play a game on Sunday. That's
not happening.
That's crazy. Let's say.
It won't happen. It won't happen.
And actually, I mean, to circle back, I mean, I think, and I haven't seen confirmation, but I think, when they were talking about canceling the games, supposedly a lot of that came from the NFL Players Association and the coaches and stuff. I mean, I think the coaches, frankly, did the NFL a great service. Like they basically, they took the teams to the locker rooms and so forth, and they sort of helped pull the sort of situation down there and sort of set up for that game being canceled and so forth. And I think the lower level guys there, the coaches and the reps on the field and so forth, I think really helped out the league with that, and they sort of helped guide them to what the right decision was.
Yeah, and that's the way it should be, because nobody's more affected than the players there. Like they shouldn't have to have a decision that, I mean, it's important that there are protocols in place and that there are rules for these things, because otherwise it would be just complete, helter skelter. That wasn't necessarily the case, but again, it seemed obvious to like anybody who was kind of watching the game that they weren't gonna go and play like under any circumstances.
When Booger was the voice of reason, that's the thing that was sort of jarring. Listen to ESPN, I'm like, Booger's kind of sitting there saying the obvious answers here, and like Susie's trying to not get in trouble with the league, and trying not to overstep or whatever, and he's like, you're not playing.
Yeah, he was right.
He did a great job, and most of the ESPN, I think the reporters actually did a good job in an impossible situation, and I think Joe and Troy did as well, right? Because they're dealing in an information vacuum, and they didn't go crazy speculating and stuff like that. I think they tried to handle it as best they could.
Yeah, and there's and you want to talk about speculation, we're back to the part where there's 500 million doctors on Twitter now who've determined the exact cause and exactly what happened and everything, and we're just not going to know any of that stuff for a while. We'll know at some point, probably. I don't think it's going to be a mystery here forever. And again, it's got to become another stake in the ground of learning and improvement, right? Whatever it is, like whatever parts that can be improved in the process. If there's a catastrophic injury on the field that involves cardiac arrest, like the game is going to be canceled, but everybody's got to remain in the stands for a while, right? Like so we're not creating even more panic. And like there's just all these other protocols that now hopefully I'm sure there was a lot of stuff there, but now they have a way to refine it. They have another way to document it. And the other thing is, at every single stadium in every sport, you can bet that the people that are involved in this stuff this is at the top of their mind, thinking, holy shit, what if something happens tonight? Right. And that's the way they have to go into every one of these type events. And for the most part, and at least, in professional and major college sports, like that's the way it happens, that's the way it happens. And that's why this young man is is America's son now, and
Yeah.
hopefully stays that way for a while. All right, dog. Do we do any more? We kind of did a lot on that there, and of course, I think people can, if you've listened to us before, I think you could tell that this is quite a different episode from what we usually do. But sometimes we have our moments like this. It's a little different tone, clearly somber. I think we're both kind of expressing ourselves, not just in a factual manner, but certainly an emotional manner as well. So I hope you can afford that to us on this night, and hopefully, or day, or whenever it is that you're watching or listening, and that you maybe, if as Kim Marriott was on before in the chat, and she says, thanks for allowing me to join you as you discussed America's son while I walk the dog tonight. Stay safe out there, my friends. I mean, that's kind of, so I feel like if you have those sentiments or those feelings, and you're listening to it, hopefully this gives you, a little moment of peace or ease, and togetherness.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And say a prayer for the young man.
Doug, we usually do the, it will be kind of like at this point that we do the advertisements. So just mention them by name: Gatto Acupuncture and Wellness in Glen Rock, New Jersey; Mascolo Group Realtors, fmsgraphics.com, and Big Ed's Car Wash in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. Just please take a moment at whatever time, and just look them up in the description for the show, because they help us do what we're doing. And no matter if you're on Facebook, or if you're on YouTube, if you're on TalkShoe or Amazon or Apple Podcasts, all the information about our sponsors and supporters is in there. So please go give that a look, and do the whole subscribe thing or whatever. Should we kind of finish it up with a little baseball, dog?
Yeah, let's put a little happy. Well, I guess. Oh, it's good news for the Red Sox. I'm not sure it's happy for a Yankee fan there, but we can talk a little baseball.
Okay, so Rafael Devers, the third baseman in Boston for now the next 11 seasons, at $331 million total. Let's say it, dog. Pending physical, right? Like,
Yeah,
that'll be our intro into the Carlos Correa part of the show.
that is true.
Yeah, so the Red Sox, they go to the 11th year for a little bit of a younger player, right? He's not Aaron Judge's age, getting 11 or 9 or whatever. But the first thing, it's sure, great, whatever. I mean, the first thing everybody is thinking is, why couldn't they have just stepped up for Bogarts, and they could have gotten him for like way cheap, comparatively, if they had just done this, a year ago, and now they're giving Devers 30 million. It's just slightly over 30 million a year, 30.09, I think it is, something like that, per year for 11 years. Yeah, you couldn't have just, I mean, isn't part of the thing like having Devers and Bogarts? But I guess not, right?
Yeah, 50 million more to give to Devers. Yeah, I think part of it is the history, right? So they got the blowback from Bogarts and Betts moving on and so forth, and they kind of got squeezed on a little bit, right? We talked a little bit with Nimmo, with the Metsies, with DeGrom going right. That also kind of increased his importance due to the fan base and franchise value. And I think part of that had to be on the Red Sox side, that look, we can't afford to let another guy go down the situation. So let's lock this in and start to I don't say stabilize the franchise. That's a little extremist, and it's not like the Red Sox are in trouble or anything, but put a marker down that we're big players in these foundational deals for our core players, and we're going to do that. And kind of like the Braves have done a great job, Dodgers done a great job. Some of the other ones are moving to that, where you're taking the guy before he gets that free agency and just locking him up and keeping him with your team for the duration. We'll see. We'll see if that's going to be the answer or not, right? The push was to get the shorter deals, bigger money. That way, if you have injury or turnover or change in player ability, that you were able to escape it. Now we're trying to extend it out and take a little bit less each year to try and keep those guys around. We'll see if that's the right strategy or not.
I mean, everybody but the Braves, basically. The Braves just signed guys for a few less years and way less money. Apparently, that's like
they are irritatingly effective.
So the thing about Devers, right? Like he's 26, so this contract takes him to age 37, and as a third baseman, you sort of feel like that's a little easier to swallow because you even like he's already a great hitter, he's an elite hitter, and now he's approaching that age 27 to 80 to age 32 set of seasons, so there's an expectation, like history would tell you, that there's a really good chance he could get even better. And that would make then him coming down from his peak still probably give him, 4 or 5 maybe good years as a hitter. The thing is, he's always been suspect defensively at third. We did our Stratomatic special and he got the 3 at third, but he's been a 5 before. So that's kind of a big jump. It makes you wonder at some point if he's going to move to the other side of the dime, and as our pal Jerry Milani says, once you move to first base, that's it. You're not going anywhere else. There's no place else left to go.
Let me limber up and hop out the short again.
Yeah, no, I mean like DH, right?
Yeah,
but that's you. I mean, I guess. In 11 years, right? In 2034, is $30 million a year for a DH gonna, what is that gonna be? Or a first baseman, or say he continues to improve defensively at third, he'll probably be, still a decent value. So who knows? I mean, these long-term deals, the history of them says they are not good business. Like, it's rare that you've seen a deal where it's been, a lock, stock, and barrel where you could say that was a good deal. That was a good deal it's always a good deal for the player. Like this, that's no exception. It's always a good deal for the player. But the one that comes to mind,
I mean, A-Rod was pretty good, right? The first A-Rod.
I don't know. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say CC Sabathia is the one I was going to say. Okay. I think that was it. So the Yankees did get the World Series win, their last, and he was a very effective pitcher for a long time. At the end, the wheels came off a little bit, but then he kind of rebounded, and they still were signing him to deals after the original 8-year deal. So that's to me, that's a sign of success when you're bringing a guy back for more years after the long-term deal is done and you won a World Series and it's the last one that you've been to. So probably that's the one I look at. The reason why I say no to the A-Rod deal is because it was so far and away. You're talking about the first one with Texas. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yep.
Okay. So it was so far and away over the top of what anybody else was getting at the time. And the only reason that Texas did it was because they knew that they had to offer him something, outlandish for him not to end up somewhere else like Boston or either of the New Yorks, right? And they did. And in the end, by the middle of that deal, the 25 million or so a year that he was getting was, it was reasonable because he was probably the best player in the league, but he was in Texas for 3 years and they were horrible. Like, I mean, they didn't win anything and they handcuffed themselves. Like they had no chemistry with the team. Their payroll was just lopsided. And, it wasn't a winning formula for them. And then they make the deal straight up with the Red Sox. Right. And, that gets scuttled, and then he ends up as a Yankee for Alfonso Soriano. And you look at that, right? Alfonso Soriano went elsewhere, and he went into different positions other than second base, but he was a phenomenal offensive player. And you also forget that guy hit what would have been a World Series winning home run off of Curt Schilling. Like if Mariano Rivera doesn't have like, one of the 2 or 3 mistakes of his whole career, basically, where, guys are getting hit by a pitch and bats are breaking and the infield's in and blah, 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 and 900 other things. Alfonso Soriano hit the go-ahead home run off of Curt Schilling in that game 7 of that World Series. So if the Yankees, here's a good debate.
I think you're killing the A-Rod. I mean, if you look at A-Rod's numbers, though, I mean, just like for pure value, I will say, looking at just pure value of the contract, and did that work out? Now that you open up a valid criticism of how that fits in with the strategy of the franchise, which is a different one, right? And if you're saying Texas went and did that and could surround him with nothing else, that yes, you paid a lot of money, you got a lot of value from that player, but you didn't really change the value of your team. I mean, that's fair, but you won the MVP 3 times, Gold Glove, Silver Slugger, like all the way down. I mean, basically had like an OPS of 1,000, like Hall of Fame numbers. Basically the entire contract, right?
Inner circle.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, there were reasons, obviously, right? But for just value of that contract, if you told them these are going to be the numbers when he signed, I think they'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah. So, that's fair. The problem, the second contract was they didn't have to do it.
Yeah, that was more questionable. Even those were 900 and 800 OPSs. So even they weren't awful.
But again,
they didn't need to. Yeah, they did need to do that. That was a sillier one.
They could have he would have stayed for less.
Yeah.
I think he would have stayed for a lot less years and dollars. I think he would have stayed. I don't think the market was as great for him that second time. And I also I think he didn't want to leave. So, George Steinbrenner stepped in and he just made the deal with A-Rod, agents on the side.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, that's interesting, and behind the scenes, did they know why his performance was so good, right? Like, I mean, or were they overlooking it because there were other guys that were, all over baseball kind of doing the same thing anyway, except for Big Papi, apparently. One exception. It's Big Papi. It is kind of funny to see those 2 guys sit together and they're great buddies and everything. And A-Rod just totally gets the shaft of it, and Big Papi, who was like in the Mitchell Report and everything, right? Like he was, right? Like he was in there, and and he's just because he's Big Papi, like he just gets away with it. I don't know, whatever. Hypocrisy of baseball and sports. Who knew?
Lou Correa or
yeah. We got to do that. I think it's relevant to this whole discussion because, so Doug, the red flag is December 14th, right? He signs an 11-year, $350 million deal. He agrees to it. We should say he agrees to the terms of an 11-year, $350 million deal with the San Francisco Giants, who had missed out on Aaron Judge, and we're looking to make a big splash. And a lot of people are saying, what are they doing? Why would they give him that money? And then the press conference is supposed to be like a couple of days later. And like a half hour before the press conference, they're like, the press conference is not happening and there's no more information. And you're like, okay, this is fucked up. Like, what's going on? And, later that night, like hours later and in the middle of the night, he's now agreed to a deal for 1 year longer, but at $35 million total less with the Mets. So a guy has a press conference. It's almost certainly something that has to do with his physical, which the speculation was right. Yeah. And now he's immediately jumping into a $35 million pay cut. Yeah. How many more red flags do you need if you're the Mets? And now I think the latest that we're hearing, I think it was a Puma, Mike Puma from the
Ken Rosenthal's been on it. A couple other guys, Puma's had information on it as well.
Yeah, like that contract, whatever it ends up being, is I guess he still wants to, stay with the Mets, but it's all they're saying is the contract is going to look much different, and Dog, to me that means like years and dollars are going to look different. So if you're him, like, you cannot get your signature signed on that paper fast enough. So if you're the Mets, why are you? I don't know. I don't get it. They don't need to swim in those waters with him. Like, I mean, he wants to be there, so that's good, right? But like, David Wright was one of the best players in the history of your franchise, and this guy might be facing the same kind of issues. So, and like, you saw the difference, like when you had David Wright and then when you didn't. And Carlos Correa, I think, is kind of he's sort of a similar type of player, right? Like, his what he does on the field is not equal to what he means to the team. Like, he means more to the teams that he's on. It exceeds even like whatever his performance is. And like, I feel like David Wright was that kind of guy, and the performance is excellent, but like, he's a winning player, Correa. Like, we know that.
Yeah,
he's
a presence.
He is. But if you're the Mets, like, you have these longer term deals, and you still have Alonso, and you got some really great guys, coming through the system here, and you have McNeil too. Like, I don't know. Like, I just don't understand why you would take that risk. But listen, if this contract comes out to be like 5 years, like, I would pay him 5 years.
Yeah,
at the same thing.
That's the interesting, because I was figuring that he would get some sort of carve out with, if he has an injury specific due to that, the ankle that they've identified or so forth, that they work out a deal with like the insurance underwriters, and like that sort of would kind of take some time, right? You're dealing with like Lloyd's of London, and you gotta see like, all these different things and different medical opinions and so forth. Like, it just flat out takes time.
Is that legal? Is that legal to do in a
yeah.
Major League Baseball contract, to have a specific thing
Carve
like
out?
that?
Yeah, you can. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I
I
didn't know
forget
that.
couple guys. I mean, it's unusual. I'm trying to remember. There were a couple of cases cited on that where they did have it. Yeah. So I think as long as it's obviously not a standard contract, but I believe as long as the player, and it's not ridiculous, right? I mean, I'm sure there's some sort of MLB PA has to weigh in on it somewhat, but just basically like, look, if all of a sudden you can't play anymore, and again, maybe it's not even like the contract is void, but like it gets picked up, kind of like the David Wright situation, right? Where you had that sort of thing. So you got to negotiate something that Lloyd's is like, hey, no, we're not covering that ankle, right? So then you got to get in the back and forth of like, well, okay, well maybe we'll cover it, but you get less benefits and so forth. And that's where you have a 3-party negotiation going on there to kind of do that now. Or like you were sort of saying, maybe he just, the Mets say, you know what, we'll go half the time, we'll give you the same dough per year, and if everything works out okay, we'll roll it forward and do another one in 5 years again. And Correa says, fine, I'll take that risk. I don't think it's that big a risk versus, I'm going to go longer out and I'm going to get paid less because everyone else thinks this is a bigger deal than I do. I don't know, right? The problem, like for Correa, like he's got nowhere else to go, right? Like, who else is he signing with, right? I mean, if the Mets clearly have the money to absorb this sort of thing, will kind of do whatever they want to do, or want to find a way to make a deal happen. If you don't cut that deal after lowering your price, that's a bad negotiating spot for Correa. So yeah, we'll see. But
I just refreshed MLB.
Well,
he just signed a 4-year, $8 million deal with the Braves.
You son of a bitch. I almost got rizzed right there.
4 years.
I was about to give it a shout out. The 4 years, like, wow, you really nailed that.
4 years, $8 million total. So he's getting $2 million a year from the Braves. He took the Brave discount.
Oh, that is hurtful.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was
supposedly
good
we're
though.
getting close. A couple of headlines had here that 3 hours ago, it's deal is getting close. Yeah, this kid in the I Love New York shirt, so that was pretty good.
Yeah, but he's got to put like he's playing on the fans' heartstrings at this point because he wants to
Mhm.
get the deal done. He has to get the deal done. He needs
Yeah,
his name on that contract.
yeah.
But
There's
there's a huge difference between a 12-year deal and a 7-year deal, right? Like
Yep.
it's a huge difference. He's not going to get that kind of money. Like why you don't even have to go anywhere near 300 million for him at this point with these questions because nobody's going to do it. Nobody's going to do it. You don't have to
Yeah,
go anywhere near 12 years
yeah,
either.
and that's and that's the that's the tricky part, right? Is that you want to get a good deal, right? If you're Cohen, um, you obviously don't want to hamstring the franchise going forward. You also don't necessarily want to get the reputation of ripping the guy's face off and sort of doing it right. And like he's sort of been trying to do the right thing. You sort of jumped in and pursued him, right? You got engaged on it. How do you deal with this in good faith to kind of get across the finish line and do what's right for both the player and the team? And I think that's just it. That's just why it takes time. As I said, I think the fact there's clearly underwriting going on behind the scenes that's what makes it more difficult, right? Because now it's not just the two guys in the room. Now you got a syndicate in London that you're having to deal with, and that's clearly a major portion of this deal.
So if you're the Mets and now you have the hammer, do you say, okay, we're going to make it a 5-year deal for 140. So you'll exceed the average annual value. You get 28 million a year, but we're going to do it for 5 years. And we'll have a mutual option for the 6th year. Like, is Correa going to take that, or is he going to go and shop his
Yeah,
wares somewhere else? Like, or
yeah.
would the
So well, that
Twins then come
yeah, and
back
that
in and say, you know
yeah,
what, we're going to put us in. We'll give you 200 million for that time.
yeah. So that's that again. I think is where it's it's tough. You don't want to trash their player's reputation, and you know he's paying a lot of money to kind of earn goodwill around the whole situation, and be best buds with Boris and all the top flight free agents and so forth. You don't want to burn him, and and I would say Steve Coney has a reputation. He's he doesn't have a bad reputation within
No,
within
not
this.
at
I mean,
all.
he's right. I mean, he's a horrible guy. He's not gonna he's not gonna roll over or anything. But like he has a pretty good reputation of he doesn't pull scumbag moves like that, right? So I think I'm almost leaning more towards like you keep the length. Maybe the numbers come down some, and there's almost stuff like you can't see behind the scenes of like the underwriting coverage and so forth that reduces the risk to the Mets. Like their ideals, they want him to play for the remainder of his career and be a great Met, right? So that's sort of what you're gunning for is on that. So the primary drive is really how do you do that um, without taking on undue financial risk. That's where the underwriting and the insurance comes in. Not doing that and then saying, well, we'll just go do 5 million. Yeah, you're reducing your risk on that somewhat, but that's a really sort of and it's just a different agreement then at that point, right? Like it's not like if his ankle's messed up and could get messed up 2 or 3 years, like is it a case where the ankle is going to decide at year 8 to magically get hurt? Or it's like this could happen at any point along the way. I mean, that we don't have that information, right? Is it a degenerative thing that will only hit late 30s? Okay, then maybe the 5-year deal makes sense, and that's a way around it. But I'm gonna guess it's more. I would lean more towards they keep those years and just find a way to come up with terms and conditions that make it acceptable to both the Mets and that. And if he plays out and it's never a problem, he gets all his money. And from the Steve Cohen point of view, he's fine with that. It's how do you figure out the way to limit the downside to the franchise if you can't do that?
I think there's another side though too, which is that his salary dollars per year, even if they're being covered by insurance, would still count against the luxury tax, whether they're
Fair?
paying him or not, right? So that would be a reason also that I would want to take like term off of that deal.
Yeah.
Uncle Paul has chimed into the comments, dog.
What we
He
got here?
says one option that Correa would want is 5 years, 150 million, and an opt out after 4. He may re-up after 5 if he stays healthy. Now, if I'm the Mets, like, yeah, I would do that, and that's the deal.
Yeah,
I
I'm
would
not
have.
sure.
I would
Yeah,
have done that
I'm
deal
not
at the
su-
beginning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, that was somewhat what Cohen was sort of floating out originally, right? I mean, theoretically, and I don't know if that's ever been confirmed, but like when the Giants are going to sign, all of a sudden the Mets are coming in as the late bidder with like the 9,270, I believe, offer at that time. And so, obviously a lot longer and so forth. Didn't know about the medical issues. Didn't know. We'll see, right? But that was sort of their thing to kind of get into there. So I guess the 5 year is an equivalent on that. I don't know if Korea would do that deal. That's really
Well,
that's
would
that's
it
really
would if
that's
there's
really
no
almost
other.
yeah.
What if
I
there's no
guess.
other deals out there?
I mean, you're. I mean, if you sign that after these, you basically are saying you're damaged goods. And I'm not. That's. I mean, I think his thing is more like just get the term and get. Well, I mean, like they all don't have money out the yin yang at this point, but like certainty of the remainder of my career versus trying to be cute, a la Trevor Bauer, right? And do like the year by year thing and sort of maximize. I think he kind of wants to set that this is. He'll be here, he'll be done, he'll be the New York guy, whatever else, and it's going to be a great part. And I'm right next to Lindor, and like that's what I want for the rest of my career. So like a 5 opt out after 4, I don't think really solves what is the player's ambition.
I feel
So
like Uncle
I mean
Paul.
it's a way to do it, but I think it's sort of like a real backup choice for both the team and the player. Right? I mean, if you just can't come to an agreement, like if the unraised won't touch it, then maybe you do the 5 year and say, well, that's another way to do it because we just simply can't. Neither side can sort of get to where we want to go. So this is a way to kind of split the difference and hope it works out.
I feel like Uncle Paul has an inside source here because he seems pretty sure, and he says that's what it's going to come down to.
There you go.
Never know. Uncle Paul pulls.
Yeah, he's got connections.
I think Uncle Paul's coming over this week.
Really?
Yeah. So we'll have to post a pic.
Yeah. Do we TikTok anymore? We ban our TikTok after the Chinese are monitoring us.
Where's our intern? Where's our TikTok intern?
Where's the intern? She doesn't care.
She doesn't care.
She'll share with China in a heartbeat. You damn it, dog.
Hey, Mike. How come you guys don't do TikTok anymore? Because she don't care. The Uncle Paul says he's coming over tomorrow, but as you know, there's no today, tomorrow, or yesterday when you're podcasting because we don't know when people are going to be listening to this. That's why we say January 4th, 2023, because who knows? Our yet to be born grandkids might check this out someday.
There you go.
Diamond Dog certainly is.
Diamond Dog is all fired up right now.
All right.
I don't think I'm getting my nap.
Hey, I don't think you are either. You could just go straight to bed for the night though, after
Good.
walking her.
Good. I got a walker. We got a little workout going. A little workout.
I decided today.
We got to do some doggy cutbacks here. So I got to lay off 20% of the dog.
I decided that I decided I needed a walking goal for the year.
There you go.
Oh, I'm up to 6.9 miles today. It's pretty
nice.
Good.
That was like 3 something.
Most of them, like, let's say 3.2 plus 3.2. Oh wait, no, 3. Yeah, I did. Well, I did 6.4.
Speaking of which, I walked right by Steve Cohen today. Sort of.
Really?
I went around 55 Hudson. No, him.
Oh.
55 Hudson. I was around there. I'm like, hey, there it is. I was looking for the 0.72 sign. I was gonna do a little tweeter.
Yeah,
but, well, did not see the sign. So I gotta see it. I guess I have to go in the building. I thought it might be on the outside or something like that. 0.72. So.
Get him on the show.
That would be.
Why wouldn't he come on?
Why
Cousin
wouldn't
Anthony's coming on. Oh shit, did I just say that? All right, we got to go. We got to go.
Do we
All
clear that?
right, do all the whole thing where you subscribe or whatever, and follow us on Twitter at Jeff Healy 8. That's the number 8.
Tell
At
all your
Diamond
friends to
Diehards
tell
for
all
me.
your friends.
At Diamond Diehards for me. It's Riz, and everywhere on social media. Check that out.
Drop in the comments if you want the Diamond Dog to have her own Twitter account.
Yeah, just keep putting her on yours.
So
that's better. She doesn't have to be a dog of Twitter. She could be your dog. The dog's dog.
That's true.
She's a dog's dog. Yeah. So that's going to do it. Thanks for joining us on the live stream. If you did it, if you want to catch future ones of those, facebook.com/groups/diamond diehards. We're doing it a little bit less these days, but we felt like tonight was a good time to do it. Of course, there's no tonight. It's Wednesday night. And of course, all of our prayers and good karma being sent to the young man that we're all praying for now, Damar Hamlin. And I think that about sums it up there, dog. So
yep.
I'll wrap it up there for the dog. Jeff Healy. This is Joe Rizzo. Diamond Diehards is out.